Welcoming you to a life of awareness, the Presence Project is excited for you to join us for today's podcast with your host, Paul Kerzner.
Hello and welcome to episode 46 of Are You Being Present? My name is Paul Kerzner. I want to welcome you to the present moment. I want to welcome you to the here and now. And I want to thank you wholeheartedly, sincerely, and deeply for joining me in this amazing present moment. The title and topic for today's podcast is Experiencing Depression with Presence. And I chose this topic because it's certainly an issue that I deal with in clinic, but it's also something that I've dealt with in my own personal life, and as well as the people who are in my life have had that experience. So I thought it was really relevant for me to kind of delve into depression and talk about how presence and being present can help alleviate some of the symptoms. Before I go any further, I want to be really clear here that I'm not saying that being present is going to cure depression. That's not realistic, and that's not exactly how it works. But what I'm saying is that there are a variety of tools that we use to be present that can be used by those who are going through depression to help ease some of the suffering, some of the strife, some of the turmoil. Depression is certainly a human experience that many people share. And Western medicine is certainly effective for numerous people when treating depression. You know, whether it's being in talk therapy, seeing a psychologist, seeing a psychiatrist, taking psychotropic medications. There are a variety of options that Western medicine will provide to you. And while it does help a decent amount of people, it certainly is not an end-all be-all. It does not provide relief for everyone. When it came to me experiencing depression earlier in my life, talk therapy certainly helped, but it didn't help enough. It wasn't enough for me. And, you know, there were also a variety of other things that I tried along the way, but it really wasn't until I fully embraced mindfulness and all that comes along with it that I was able to really see my depression or my experience with depression in a much different light, in a much different way. And as I talk about it, you know, being present is a key component to mindfulness. So without that, there's nothing that can really blossom from it. You have to learn how to be present. You have to learn how to honor the present moment. So how can presence help alleviate some of the effects of depression? You know, there's a lot of different components and there's a lot of different variables when it comes to one person being depressed over another. Because it could be a chemical reaction in a person's brain. They might be imbalanced. It could also be an experience that someone's going through that is very difficult. It could be because another person really spends a lot of time ruminating. So depression is something different for everyone. But I think most people will agree that there's a depressed feeling that goes along with it, where we feel withdrawn, frustrated, angry, tired. There's a number of different labels that go along with feeling quote unquote depressed. So where does presence come into this? And why? And the question is, well, why presence? Why would I want to be present while I'm being depressed? And there's a very good reason for it. Being present means that you're in a state of acceptance, but it also means that you're constantly reminding yourself that every moment is changing. Nothing stays the same and nothing is permanent. Now, as you're going through your depression or going through these depressed feelings, the one thing that you can do is continue to remind yourself that it's not going to last, that it's going to change, that tomorrow is going to bring all new opportunities, that yesterday was a little different, that we need to let go of all of the different thoughts and feelings and just be present, be with whatever it is that you're feeling in that moment. No matter how it feels, accept it for what it is. Accept whatever decisions that you've made in the past. Accept whatever might come into the future. Just get into that state of acceptance and remember that everything's going to be okay because nothing stays the same. I liken presence to almost a medicine of sorts, because if we look at it as a medicine, then we can use presence in a way medicinally to treat some of our ailments. And depression is no different. Depression, especially for depression. And I know it could be difficult at those times where you feel so low, you feel so down and depressed. But those are the times that you need to be the most present, because it doesn't matter much that if you like this experience or not, because by not liking it, by being angry at however you're feeling, you're only keeping yourself stuck in that loop. So what I'm talking about is absolving yourself of the suffering that's taking place by getting into a state of acceptance, by saying, this is where I'm at, this is what's going on. I'm going to be really honest with myself. Am I feeling depressed? Yes. Am I depressed? I very well might be depressed, but that's where I'm at right now. That's what's going on right now. We don't have to worry about tomorrow. We don't have to worry about next hour. We don't have to think about what took place an hour ago. Those are all irrelevant, because we're going to be so present in each and every present moment with exactly how we feel in that present moment that we're going to be okay with it. And that's why presence is so important, especially for depression, because it's not about controlling your emotions. It's about being okay with where you're at, how you're at, and who you are at in that moment. That's the first suggestion. That's the first tip. That's the first way to implement presence with depression. And I just kind of dug into a little bit about acceptance, but acceptance is really important as well. Like, you can't necessarily change your depressed feelings in that moment instantaneously, but you can certainly get into a deeper state of acceptance to remind yourself, okay, this is where we're at, and I'm going to accept it. I'm not going to fight it, because there's a tremendous amount of self-inflicted suffering that takes place when we resist, when we reject, when we push against, and it just keeps us further and pulls us further and deeper into whatever experience that we're having. And there's a lot of anger when it comes to depression. It's not just about sadness. Typically, when I've treated patients that have been depressed, it's a variety of different emotions, but when I say usually, it's mostly, it has to do with stuff that's happened in the past and pulling it more into the present moment. Now, it's not to say that some people aren't depressed about what's taking place in front of their face, but I would say that the majority of experiences that I've seen, as well as in my own life, depression has been about the past. And typically anxiety has been about the future. So, we've been working together on letting go of past memories. One of the helpful tools that we can look at is forgiveness. Forgiveness will help absolve you. It'll help absolve the memories. It'll absolve the people that committed whatever things that you're holding on to. And it's not to say that we're condoning whatever took place or whatever happened to you, but we're trying to find some peace here. So forgiveness is something that we need to look at. First, we forgive ourselves for holding on to whatever it is that we've held on to. Then we have to forgive the experience or the person or the place or the thing, so that we can let go of whatever's holding us into that space that's helping to feed the depression, to help feed the feeling space that you're in that you don't necessarily like or want. So forgiveness is a really helpful presence tool that I suggest that you think about implementing. Gratitude, on the flip side, is something that you can use as a way to kind of shift your attention out of the depression or the depressed feelings that you're experiencing. Now, we're not talking about numbing this out, but shifting your perception, shifting the way you're seeing things can go a really long way. It might not necessarily change the way you feel right in that moment, but it helps get that ship headed in a different direction. So, gratitude journal, gratitude in general, gratitude for being alive, gratitude for food, gratitude for everything helps, and it's cumulative too. So if you're currently depressed or in a depression or whatever it is, gratitude is a good step. It's a good part of really holistically treating, the experience that you're going through. Of course, starting a gratitude journal would be would definitely be helpful. But even for you to just look around and remember all of the great things that you're grateful for will go a really long way. Because I've noticed that when people are depressed, and the depression experience that I've had in the past, we tend to lose track of all of the things that are happening right in front of our face, of all the good things. And all of the negative things seem to become accentuated. And our perceptions, our vision of what's really happening gets convoluted. And it becomes very difficult to have clarity. And presence is all about seeing things for exactly how they are, not for how we think they are or should be. So, even taking a step back and looking at how these depressed feelings, how this depression is shifting the way that you're seeing life, that's powerful too, because at the end of the day, reality is perception and perception is reality. The way you see things is the way that it's going to be, always. So change the way that you're describing things. It's going to go a long way. You want to change your words. When we get stuck in a depression, we think it's never going to end. It's going to be forever. It's permanent. And that's just not true. Nothing is permanent. Everything's constantly changing. And, we talked about that at the beginning of this podcast. It's worth reminding you and for you to remind the other people in your life that no, it's not going to be forever. It's not permanent. Nothing stays the same. Everything is constantly changing. You aren't always depressed. You're not going to always be depressed. Be present in this moment. See it for what it is. Embrace it. But more importantly, look at it as a learning experience, as an opportunity. I think it's really easy to get trapped in this mindset where we look at the depression or negative feelings as a travesty. It's something terrible. But really, it's not. It's life presenting you with an opportunity to either overcome a challenge or for you to understand that everything's relative to everything else. And it's the relativity of life that brings so much beauty. How could you ever know what true happiness is if you don't know what sadness is? It's the same thing with light and dark and dry and wet. So the experience that you're going through, the depressed feelings that you're experiencing, bring relevance to the opposite experience, which is true joy. And you are definitely going to feel that because you're going to know what the opposite feels like. And that by itself makes depression and overcoming depression that much more worthwhile. But it's this whole mindset that we get stuck in. And we talked in the past about the ego and the mindset. Being depressed, it's the most important time for you to observe the thoughts in your head and how they're fueling the emotions that you're experiencing. Because you get stuck in this endless cycle, this endless loop of negative thoughts and negative emotions, and they fuel each other, and it just keeps on going. It keeps on pushing you further and further and further down into a feeling space that, is undesirable to everyone. So that podcast number 44, Observing the Voice in Your Head with Presence, if you're going through a depression or you're feeling depressed, I definitely recommend you listening to that podcast and maybe follow it up with podcast number 9, Acceptance of the Present Moment, so that you can kind of layer it in, so that you can start seeing what the voice in your head is telling you. And then you can get into more of an place of acceptance for the experience that you're having so that you can allow it to flow through. Because it's ultimately about the flow state. And being in a flow state, again, doesn't mean that everything that flows through is going to feel good. It doesn't have to feel good. It's all for the experience of life. It's all for the feeling space. It's all for the relevance. And that's why we're here. That's why we're on Earth. We're not here to just experience part of the human emotional spectrum, okay? And that's, what psychotropic medications does is it kind of numbs out the top and the bottom. I truly believe in my heart that we're here on Earth to experience the variety of emotions as human beings, good, bad, or indifferent. None of them last. They're all fleeting anyway. So if you feel great in a moment, okay, that's good. Don't worry. It won't last. If you feel terrible in a moment, all right, that's okay. It's not going to last. But understanding the true human spectrum and that, we should not hold on to anything. any feeling space, that we should be okay with however we're feeling in that moment and work towards maybe a better feeling space, that's okay too. Because you could have desire, but you're just not holding on to things. You're not grasping at anything. You're in a state of allowance. You're in that flow state. So getting back to depression, it doesn't really matter for this, at least for this podcast, for me to go into the details, the scientific explanation of why people feel depressed. I really just wanted to spend some time presenting to you why being present can help alleviate some of the symptoms of depression. And I hope that it has been helpful for you to hear these things, whether you're feeling depressed or not, or you know someone that's depressed or not. Helping them or helping yourself be present, pulling yourself into the present moment, seeing things for what they are, reminding yourself everything's constantly changing, getting into a state of acceptance, getting into a flow state. These are all things that are going to help, and they need to be added to your toolbox. As good as a carpenter can ever be, he's only as good as the tools that he uses in the moments that he needs them. That's a great analogy, by the way. So my suggestion is, when you're feeling these feelings, use your tools. Break out your mindfulness practice. Take out your gratitude journal. Do some breathing exercises. Listen to a guided meditation. Talk to someone. If you're depressed, yes, go seek help, seek counseling, seek therapy. Do everything that you need to do, but do it holistically, because there's not going to be one single thing that's going to quote unquote cure your depression. You're going to have to work your way through it, as I did and as the people do that I work with. There has to be a beginning, middle, and end. And again, that's the flow state. There was a beginning to the point that might have triggered the depression. There's a middle point, and there will be an end point. As long as you can stay in that state of understanding, it's going to be a lot easier. And you're going to bring an end to the self-inflicted suffering that you are culling, that you're bringing forward, that's making this even worse than it needs to be. So try and let go. Remember that everything is constantly changing. Remember that everything's going to work out. Remember that you're okay, and that everything is going to be okay, and that you got this far, and you're going to make it. We're all going to make it in some way. It doesn't, we don't know exactly how, and we don't need to know exactly how, but we just have to remember that, life is amazing and it's magical, and sometimes it's terrible, but it is what it is, and it's exactly what you make of it. My reminder, my present to you, is that live in the present moment, see it for what it is, and remember that all is well.
Thank you for listening to the Are You Being Present podcast, brought to you by the Presence Projects. Remember, you have a choice. Choose to be present.